if I were in my actual life, I would go, oh, a feeling, gross, get rid of it.
Repress that shit. Sorry.
Thank you for agreeing to be part of this panel, and I'm really excited to have this discussion. So let's get right into it. I have a fun opening question, which is, do you feel like there's any truth to the stereotype of the suffering artist? And if so, is it because we're making it that way?
I could go first. I unfortunately I do feel like there is some truth to it, just because it is a competitive field and it is hard to make a living. When you're a singer, when you're first starting out, when you're a musician first starting out, an actor, whatever arts performer you may be, it's just very competitive. Um, but I mean, and I don't know that it's necessarily continued by the fact that we perpetuate the stereotype, but I feel like a lot of us do foster a narrative of the starving artist, the suffering artist, that isn't necessarily helping us. It could be a bit of a self-fulfilling prophecy moment, or at least it isn't a useful, I suppose, energy to have. And I mean, idealistically, it'd be nice if we could all look at the bright side all the time, but easier said than done as well. So I know that's not much of a solution of an answer, but
yeah, I also thought that this was a really interesting kind of like opening question to talk about, because I do also agree that there is some truth in this. And I know, like, for myself, when I'm going through kind of like rough patches in my life, or I'm just feeling down or something's going on, I feel a lot more connected to like the music I'm listening to, or just kind of like my creative and artistic side. Um, yeah, and I think that like because of those like really strong emotions, that like it helps me like connect to music better, and like kind of share that side of myself. But like it is, yeah, so like I also feel like, yeah, I bring more like passion, maturity, and understanding. But like the problem is though, is like sometimes that can be seen as like an essential ingredient to like creating a masterpiece or something. And like, and that's where I think the problem lies. Like you don't have to like be chronically depressed or like go through something extremely traumatic to create just like beautiful music that is really emotional. So I think we do have to be careful about that line. But I just know, like, for myself, like when something is going on, I do feel a lot more in touch with that side of myself.
I feel like my personal connection to the suffering artist is more, I feel like we're always in just a never-ending pursuit of perfection. And I think that adds to it because our art is so craft-oriented, and we always, and like being in a faculty kind of environment, we're always surrounded by rivals, and then like we see like people who do so much better than us, and like and there's a constant competition going on. Not that it's a healthy way to look at it, but if you're being realistic, everybody has that moment in the day. And to a certain extent, I feel like that makes us better artists, but is it sustainable for us to want to make a healthy career out of it? Probably not. Again, not really a solution, but
I think that it's double-edged sword, and like anything, like nerves, for example, if you have a little bit of fear, that's great and it gives you an edge, but if you have too much, it becomes debilitating. And Michaela, you mentioned, you said the word self-fulfilling prophecy, and I think that that's especially really where it can come in, is when you latch on to having too much of that and you think that that is how it always is and how it's always going to be. And you kind of, I guess, construct you make that part of your musical identity or your identity in general is no, in order, like, it's inseparable that I perform or I make art and I feel awful.
I think that, like, I agree with everything that you say, and also, like, at the same time though, I feel like, I don't know if anyone else can relate, and if you do, please let me know, because I feel like the second you're being your worst critic, it actually makes all of the other critics so much easier on you. It's almost like the harsher you are on yourself, the more you get away with not sounding good, not doing well, which is, in a lot of the cases, are a false sense of reality. Because when you look at your teachers, they appreciate every little effort that you put in, they appreciate every little progress that you've made. But when we're constantly looking at ourselves, it's like, I didn't do that correct, I didn't do that well, but we don't really get to appreciate what we did well and what we, like, changed and improved on. So yeah, and I feel like we are our own worst critics, and that also adds to the stereotype also.
Yeah, I really connected with what you said just now, Candice. I feel like in my mind, I use that as a defense mechanism, as like I treat myself terribly in my mind so that nobody else can top that. Like everything else feels like easier than the way I talk to myself in my head, which again, I don't know is healthy, but it works for me, I guess.
Mhm.
Absolutely. Yeah, I feel like if I break myself down enough, it's like no one else can hurt me, so it's fine. Like I'll self-destruct and then nothing else can hurt me. It's like you're building up a wall between you and other people. But again, probably not a really healthy coping mechanism.
Yeah.
Yeah, I totally agree. I went through my Facebook feed and I was just deleting old stuff that, cleaning it up. And the number of recordings of performances that I had on there where I had prefaced it with some variety of this, and this is wrong with it, but I still want to share it. But the fact that that was the first thing I said was, here are all of its flaws. I know they're there. Please don't point them out to me. I will cry. The fact I felt the need to do that in order to put it out there when that was not the point, and people probably weren't going, oh, that vowel was funny the way I was, I think says a lot about both how I manage criticism and about the perception I have about what I think other people want to hear.
Yeah, I find that really interesting, because in a sense, it's like it's showing that kind of like a big priority of like being a musician is like to be correct and to like be perfect all the time, essentially. But really, your intention and the way that a lot of people are like perceiving the music is just the fact that, oh, this lovely person is sharing some lovely music with me just kind of for fun. Like that should be the core, I guess, value of that. But instead we feel so much like, oh, like it needs to be perfect before people can enjoy it. But no, people can enjoy it first, and that's kind of like a secondary issue. But it's interesting how it kind of gets warped in our heads like that.
Yeah.
I think it's especially difficult when you get to a high level of performance, because you know that everybody is good and that if you are not bringing something special, for lack of a better word, to your performance, then there are absolutely 20 other people ready to have the same opportunity and be better, essentially, or at least that's how it feels. And I think that goes back to the competition and about how it is a small world, and about how because it's a small world, your reputation really starts to matter early on, as opposed to if you are in, I don't know, I don't want to put down other any other professions, but if you're in something else that is perhaps a bigger world with more job opportunities, and kind of more subcategories of jobs available, then you feel like you have a little more wiggle room, I imagine, um, of how you conduct yourself. So in this education course that I'm taking, there was a point made that music is, or the arts are one of the few things that, if you want to go into the arts, school doesn't prepare you. Because if you want to become, say, an engineer, you take math, you take science, you take probably a computer course in high school, and then you apply. And if you have good grades, you go study that in university, and no extra time is needed. Whereas if you're specifically in music, then you're probably spending a lot of time outside of regular high school practicing, going to lessons, going to rehearsals. Maybe you have an ensemble that plays that's not affiliated with the school. And that's a lot of extra time that you have to devote to your craft, just to get into that kind of um, very baby career level. So I'm wondering if any of you think that that might also contribute to some of the stress, because it's cumulative in that case, because it starts early.
Yeah, I find that really interesting. I kind of personally made this observation kind of like early on in my undergrad, like, and it kind of made me realize my privilege as well. Like being able to take piano lessons and theory lessons and music history lessons, etc., buy a flute even later, even though I'm a pianist, but like all of those kinds of opportunities from a young childhood. Um, and uh, and so then when I got to university, like I felt like a pretty relatively strong student going in both like in music theory and piano. Whereas like some people were just coming like straight out of high school band, had never taken theory before or something like that. And I felt like almost kind of bad, or like that it was unfair because like I zoomed through theory no problem, but then there were other people who had never seen this stuff before. So I was like continuing to get better and better, but they were still struggling to kind of meet like the minimum requirements. And I just thought that that was kind of like an unfair way to kind of go about it. And like, I mean, there's always cuts happening to like high school like music programs. Like my high school even just like went through this whole thing. I don't even know what's going on right now, but like a lot of their like arts and musics were cut and like underfunded, and it's really sad because like it's only going to hurt people who want to do music and art.
I was kind of like one of those students you were describing that came
Yeah.
in without really much background. I just taught myself theory like a few months before auditioning for undergrad, and it was really scary. And yeah, I definitely would have appreciated um, having better resources um, growing up, because they taught us music, like there was school band and stuff, but not like theory and harmony and all that good stuff, history. Um, so I mean, it would have been better. I don't. I feel like all of us will say like the arts need more funding, um, but it's so hard. How do we fight for that? You know.
Yeah.
Michaela, did you feel like, as a student who didn't have a vast array of background knowledge coming into an undergraduate music program, did you feel like there weren't that many supports for people who had less knowledge to start with?
Yeah, I was in the fortunate combination of events where um, my school did have decent resources for people who were maybe didn't quite have it wasn't a very competitive school. It was a smaller university. Well, not a smaller university, but a smaller program, relatively speaking. And so there were like teachers there that were willing to like meet with you out of school and stuff and help you. Um, and I also have a work ethic that cannot be killed to a fault. So I feel like I was able to kind of pull myself up from my bootstraps, but yeah, it is. I feel like it is tricky. You're definitely at a disadvantage if you didn't have that background, Yeah. I still feel it sometimes. There's still times where I'm like, oh man, what would have happened if I'd have started my singing lessons 5 years earlier? How much better would I be?
I think that a lot of people, especially in something that's competitive like music, find it really easy to fall into the trap of, well, what if I had started doing this earlier? Where would I be? Because it's very hard not to look around and compare yourself, um, especially for singers, I think, because it's like, for example, Michaela and Candice and myself, we're all sopranos, but we are all very different sopranos. I think especially tricky for singers just because it is so individual. Whereas a pianist or a flautist, no offense, you look around and it's like your technique is your technique, and if someone has a better instrument, that's one thing, but it doesn't feel as personal because I mean you can get a better instrument hopefully, or if you have the money you can get a better instrument, whereas there's nothing you can do about your voice is your voice. And
It's
you
so much more
eventually
personal.
you just eventually have to make peace with that, whether you like it or not. So I'm curious, Michaela, you mentioned teachers that were supportive and willing to sit down and one-on-one and help struggling students. I'm curious, how do you all find your relationship with your studio teacher impacts your mental health, or does it?
Well, I feel like having a teacher who is really on your side and who really genuinely believes in you and not just says they believe in you really makes a big difference. Because even when you don't feel good about yourself, like you are having those self doubts that we're kind of talking about, having somebody on your side who not only supports you and is there for you, but also knows the facts and knows what they're talking about. Like sometimes I find with my parents or whatever, when they're like, "You're so amazing," I'm like, "Yeah, whatever. I mean, you're not a classically trained Western art musician." Um, Whereas, like, if my teacher says something and gives me a compliment, I'm gonna believe her a lot more than my parents. God bless them. But yeah, so I feel like it's really important. And conversely, when you don't feel like your teacher believes in you, or when you feel like they don't think you can do it, that is just the most soul crushing feeling. Um, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, my experiences kind of contrast yours and Michaela a little bit, because well, I guess it depends on your family dynamics, but I found myself looking to my studio teacher a lot for, emotional support and like validation because I don't get any from home. That sounded very sad. I have lovely relationships with my parents, but they're just not the kind to ever tell you that we're proud of you, we think you're doing well, like, all that. So I found myself looking to my studio teacher for obviously like, teaching you like technique wise and all that, but it's also it's so important for me to feel like we're going through an experience together versus that you're teaching me something. That like so long as I don't feel like I'm alone doing this project, but also in the process of that, my studio teacher is not the kind to really say, I believe in you, you're doing so well. She's not that kind, which I do appreciate because I really love how she you know, really considers what I say to her about like I'm having troubles with this, I'm like doubting myself on that, and she really kind of takes that in instead of denying it. She kind of goes, well, I see why you feel that, and from if this is the way you're feeling, but if that's not what I'm hearing in your performances, how can we work on this, not not technically, but how can we work on that mentally, how can we progress from there? And I just think it's really it's so important to have an instructor that, you know, hears you and sees you outside of just your craft, and that grows with you as a person too, and that they, you know, really care about you, not so much like not like your entire personal life, but they really care about like what's going on in your life that might have caused some of the trouble that you're going through, or like what are some of the other things that you're also having to just juggle on top of already school and everything. So I think finding an instructor like that is just crucial.
I think that relationships with studio teachers are really interesting because they're obviously they're still professional, but they're much closer than the average teacher student relationship would be, because you're working one-on-one with them every week. There's no way to hide from your studio teacher, which is both wonderful and frustrating and terrifying.
I just have a question though. So like for like singers, right? When we sing about things that are so touchy, that we need to be so vulnerable. I wonder, like, I just wanted to hear like Michaela and Suran, your like experiences on that, because have you, I just feel like somehow with a studio teacher, there is no really barriers emotionally, that when you're trying to work on a piece together, it becomes a journey. It's not just sitting there crafting at a piece of music. If it's Baroque, it's a different story. But yeah, I'm curious to like how other like musicians, especially singers, experience that too.
That's a good question.
Well, I've been in a tech lesson before, and I don't know, there was just something about the way that my teacher got the breath moving through my body, and I almost started crying. And I wasn't sad, I wasn't angry, I wasn't frustrated, I wasn't any of those things. I was just in my lesson, and there was something very, very emotionally visceral about that, just the sensation of the breath in my body, that made me really, really emotional. And I was taken aback because it's just a tech lesson. You're just figuring out how to breathe. You do that every day. There's especially something kind of emotional about it, just inherently, because it's so reliant on you, and how you, especially for singing, just create everything from scratch in yourself.
That's really beautiful. I can imagine like what kind of like feeling and like that process would feel like, and I just think that's really powerful and really beautiful.
There are a lot of like, I feel like there must be like physical, emotional connections when it comes to breathing, especially deep breathing, because you think about what somebody's like when they're crying, and it's a lot of really intense breathing. So I feel like sometimes um, when you're breathing and using more oxygen and using your muscles differently than you necessarily would when you're sitting stationary or just at your computer watching a movie or something, it's going to engage different reactions in your body.
Some kind of like body association.
I'm not a
Yeah.
biologist, so I can't say what, but it seems plausible to me.
So I'm curious, as someone who is newly kind of become a singer, if you've had any sort of experiences like that, Kristen.
Um, I'm again, yeah, I think yes. I've had a couple like lessons where I've had to like pause like mid doing something, trying something new to just kind of like freak out and like exist in that emotional state because it's just so profound and I just didn't know I could use my voice that way or I didn't know I could breathe a certain way to produce a certain sound and it's just been like I've had to pause for like a couple of minutes to just like really take that in and absorb that and that is like super like groundbreaking for me because I didn't really have so many of those moments as an instrumentalist. It felt very kind of just really rigidly structured, not a whole lot of time for those kind of those emotional moments. So yeah, it's been very interesting as like a recent singer to discover those moments.
The question for the group, which is, do you think that there is too much rigidity in how, specifically how they teach music? And do you think that young musicians would benefit from a more holistic approach to music education and trauma informed teaching?
Yeah, so this is something that I'm really like passionate about and think about a lot because someone who has gone to a psychologist for a long time, kind of on and off in my life, like my psychologist often talks about like I suffer a lot from anxiety, so how like anxiety can be used as a superpower, and I do truly believe that. Like there's times in my life where like kind of that anxiety, like it's what gets me to do a lot of things, and it makes me really ambitious, and it makes me really careful, sometimes to a fault, of course, but like it really it's kind of what drives me, and I'm really kind of proud of it in a way. So it's like, well, how can I use that temperament to my advantage and bring that into my music, make me a better musician, and how can I like use my body in a different way and like and use like my stories and my experiences and maybe the things that I've gone through in my life, and how can I really like bring that to the surface, like put myself forward as like a human with emotions first and then a human that produces second, kind of like first, second, and like be able to communicate with people like in those broader ways. And I don't know, that's something that I'm really like passionate about and want to like find ways to do that. And I don't know, I'm kind of lost right now with like how to, I guess, kind of like enforce that or like use that more in my life or something like that. But yeah.
What personality traits do you see in yourself that are a double-edged sword and that do really help in this industry to a point?
I want to say something else. On top of the anxious temperament, just the fact that I am very highly emotional and very sensitive. It's great when like producing music and people always say like, wow, like you played so beautifully and you really moved everyone that night and all that stuff. But also the other side of that is like I'm a very emotional person. So that can sometimes be tough in terms of like staying on a schedule or whatever. So
Like, I feel like I I get praised for being a vulnerable artist or whatever. but it's almost inevitable that I'm going to cry at least once during the rehearsal process, and everyone's going to have to stop because the soprano is crying, like, which is not great in a professional situation, and it's very embarrassing whenever that happens. But yeah, that's totally a double-edged sword. I feel that. And same with like my work ethic, my sense of drive, um, that I was talking about before. It's really useful to have that. I'm an extremely high functioning individual, but the other side to that coin is I drive myself into the ground a lot. When I crash hard. No good.
Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of the opposite to the both of you, because I'm wrapped very tight. So I have problem. I don't have problems connecting to what I'm trying to convey, but in performance, I always just feel just it's very uncomfortable for me to be vulnerable, to show emotions and stuff like that. But I do connect, Michaela, a lot on the, you know, driving yourself to the ground. And yeah, definitely both of those I think might be the biggest like double-edged sword that musicians might have.
I feel like I have the emotional, like being a really emotional person part down. But then when it comes to conveying, it's just kind of not there. It's like it stays all inside of me and I don't really know how to get it out. So I've definitely been told I have kind of a more like sleepy disposition. Like I don't really look super engaged, even though I'm feeling it all. So yeah, it's like it's there, but then it's also not helping me out.
I'm kind of a combination of Candace and Kristen. I think I feel very deeply, but at the same time, if I were in my actual life, I would go, "Oh, a feeling. Gross, get rid of it." So it definitely it doesn't come naturally to me when I'm, even if I say this is a character, this is somebody else, this is not me, these are not my feelings. I do not have to take these on permanently. Um it's very hard for me to get it outside of my body in a way that can be perceived by other people. And I definitely sometimes, like, I think that I'm emoting because I'm thinking about emoting, but I'm thinking about emoting and not actually emoting. So it's I know it's in there. It's just a matter of how do I get it out, because I know that it'll be really effective once I can do that. It's just bridging that connection. And I definitely also am um the type of person of when I crash hard, which has made me very accomplished for where I am in my life, but also driven me absolutely mad.
That kind of makes me want to bridge a thought together and almost like contrast it a little bit. So I kind of want to talk about vulnerability a little bit. And so like I was like kind of preparing for this a little bit, and I was thinking about like kind of that line between like actually being vulnerable as a human versus like being a musician expressing vulnerability. And I kind of wonder like how you guys kind of think about that a little bit. And like, you know, with being a musician, like, you know, we are expected to like convey a lot of emotion and really intense feelings and things like that. So I find that kind of interesting too, because as someone with like a lot of performance anxiety, like I'm trying very hard to like be vulnerable, but yet I'm like so afraid at the same time to like make mistakes, you know, have a slip up. And so it's like, it's kind of interesting. Like we're expected to be vulnerable, but then we're not allowed to make mistakes. So what do you guys think about that? I don't know.
I mean, I feel like it's much harder, much more difficult for instrumentalists to embrace making mistakes in a performance, because people will hear the hole in it, right? People will hear the crunch in it. But as a singer, obviously, as a musician, when you're performing, like especially something challenging, you are already vulnerable. Like if I'm singing a piece with 3 high A's, I feel vulnerable, like very, very vulnerable, but that's in my technique. But I've started to kind of channel that into my character, because usually I find that technical challenges and difficulties are there for a reason. Like the composers wouldn't just challenge you out of nowhere. Like there's usually an emotional tie behind it. And this is so much easier said than done, but like if you think about it as you're going through like an emotional challenge, if you know it's coming from the core, from the heart of your character, instead of you as an artist performing a piece that has been done so many ways, like for so many years before you, I found that really helped me.
Yeah, interesting.
Does anybody know Brene Brown's work?
Yes, I watched a bunch of her stuff. Yeah, I loved it.
He says that if you are not in the arena getting your ass kicked as well, then she's not interested in your feedback. And that's something that I've found really helpful, because I am in a way very sensitive, and I will take any and all criticism like a sponge and internalize it. And when I not instantaneously, but when I heard that, that was really, really illuminating for me, because I realized that I didn't have to take all criticism on board, and that all criticism is not created equally, even if the person giving the criticism thinks that it is.
Yeah, and something else too, I kind of have to remind myself as well, like it's a kind of tangentially related, but like to move forward, like you're gonna, like it's inevitable that you're gonna fall into like some pitfalls and make mistakes. Like that's the only way to move forward too, and that's really hard. Like as someone who like, you know, tries very hard to like do everything perfectly all the time, but like, you know, to move forward, you have to, or you just won't move forward.
So, why do you think that people are so reluctant to engage in these kinds of discussions, even in arts communities where, as we say, vulnerability is a core part of what we do?
I would love to speak on this. I think a lot of people confuse vulnerability with weakness, which I don't think at all is the case. I think that vulnerability is kind of the opposite of weakness, actually. I feel like it takes a lot of courage to be vulnerable and to talk about these kinds of things. I feel like it would be a lot safer to just keep it to ourselves and let it fester. And I think that's probably why it doesn't get talked about, is because it's not a fun, comfortable thing to talk about mental health. Like it's not an easy thing to do, and it's not an easy thing to find solutions for. And so I feel like it's a lot of ignorance is bliss type mentality, which we can't blame anyone for, because I think we're all more comfortable that way. But it is important. And yeah, I kind of got off topic there. But yes, misunderstanding weakness as vulnerability, I think, is a big thing, a big reason for it.
I feel like society in general is structured in such a way where you're not supposed to show vulnerability and weakness, and that it's like inherently good to just keep pushing yourself and kind of concealing any emotions, because those are just, again, signs of weakness, which don't really make sense because we're all human. We all experience things and feel things. And I think that trickles down into music, into our art, because it just feels wrong to be vulnerable sometimes, with how things are structured and run. So yeah.
really interesting and kind of again tangentially related, but there's like another word that like increasingly has been bothering me, and it's the word laziness. I don't know if anyone else kind of agrees with this, but like I just don't believe in the word lazy and the whole culture around it. Like there's just something about it that just really bothers me now. Because like even just for example, like I can count on one hand the amount of classes that I skipped in undergrad. Like just I never skipped anything. I was always punctual, did everything. But then there was one time, it was like during like a burnout time for Brooklyn, and I decided to take all my morning classes off, just sit in the library, do my own thing, work on my own stuff, and just calm down basically. And it was like the best decision I made that month. And I was like, well, I think that says something. Like, I'm not lazy for skipping classes. I'm not lazy for wanting to reschedule my lesson or, you know, needing an extension, anything like that. And actually, and there were so many professors that were really great about extensions, and super thankful for that, as many others were. Because like, it's like the term lazy, like it's just kind of this big blanket statement for like what's actually going on underneath the surface. So like, oh, you didn't hand in your assignment on time. Oh, you were just lazy. You didn't get it done. It's like, no, I was having like a mental health breakdown, or, you know, I'm not feeling my best because I've been working really hard on all these other things, etc. So I just, if there's like kind of like a big takeaway for me from like this kind of thing, is like I want people to really rethink the word lazy, and like kind of rework the conversation around that as well. And that kind of ties in with vulnerability, because, you know, if you're always pushing forward and pushing yourself to burnout because you want to avoid that term being lazy, like that's kind of tricky as well. So.
I'd just like to point out that lazy is a very ableist adjective.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't, like you said, it doesn't account for any of the context.
Yep.
It just looks at a person and says, well, you're capable. Why haven't you done this?
I feel like it implies that we all... Go ahead. No, go ahead.
I was just going to really briefly add in that we live in a society too that rewards burnout, that like sees that as a valuable trait, as like a, if you're not, you know, running on no sleep, are you even, like, what are you even doing, right?
Yeah.
Like, it's weird.
The whole like toxic productivity thing.
I mean, I think that's even reflected in how institutions deal with mental health issues from an administrative standpoint, because when Kristen and I were in second year, there was an event, there was an incident in choir, and the rehearsal ended with, I think there were like 4 of us sitting in the hallway outside the rehearsal room just crying. And we went to the choir director, and she didn't do anything, and we went to the academic advisor and nothing happened there, and we went to the dean, and nothing continued to happen. And we were told that we were making things up, or that we were exaggerating things because we wanted to get out of rehearsal, because we just didn't want to be there, because we couldn't be bothered, because we didn't care enough, which was extremely hurtful to all of us involved, and very much insulting to our own integrity. It was just very insulting all around, and very poorly handled.
I think the entire idea of accusing people of faking mental health breakdowns is so disgusting, because even if someone is faking it, which I don't think people do very often, I would rather address 100 faked mental health breakdowns than let one real one slide and put someone in danger, you know?
Yeah.
And
It
if
also says something.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Okay. I was just gonna say, and if you feel inclined to fake a mental health breakdown, there probably is a mental health breakdown happening. I mean, that's a very extreme measure to go to get your
I
needs.
agree with you on that.
Yeah, I was just gonna say that too. So
Yeah, I do think, especially in the school system too. I think absolutely in any program, I think there needs to be a talk. I don't know in what way it would happen, but like I think we need to start thinking about mental health and like it's saying out loud that your mental health is a separate project, is in a different realm from your work ethic. It's different from your attitude. Because I hear so many people mistake mental health problems with attitude, and I just think it's such a common misconception that has now been systemized, unfortunately. Um, so I don't know how we might be able to tackle that, because I think we all might be future music educators and pedagogues. So do any of you guys have any like ideas how we might be able to turn this around? Or
In general, both in society and in education and in music education, our approach to mental health is very reactive as opposed to preventative and proactive. Um, so I'm not sure that I have necessarily any specific ideas on what we could do to improve that situation, but I think just in general, more resources to, I guess, get people talking before there's an issue, you know? I don't know.
I think that
It's hard.
early educators who are good are priceless for that reason. And I think that,
Other things. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
sorry, I was just going to say that I think that if there's a broader cultural shift, then our little musical subculture will hopefully follow, because the arts do tend to mirror life. So, sorry, go ahead, Brooklyn.
Yeah, no, that's good. Yeah, so just a couple other things that I was thinking of as well. I think it would be, if nonetheless, an interesting experiment to see if it would be effective, but like within conservatories or music programs, to have kind of like in-house psychologists or physiotherapists, like specialized in music, because I don't know, just from kind of what I've been hearing, like music injuries aren't necessarily taken as seriously as like a sports injury or something like that. And like I think it would be really interesting to just kind of have like an in-house resource, like for people to go to, and so it would be kind of um, like specific to like a smaller group of people so that they could get like more attention and things like that. And even something too, I would think about, like there would be times in class where like I don't know, a lot of people would be feeling burnout and stuff like that, like, and I think it would be really useful and refreshing to even just take like class time during class time and just kind of like have a jam session and sit and talk about things, like kind of put school away for like 5 or 10 minutes and just talk to each other, like professors included, and just be like, yeah, so we're all really stressed, or like, you know, there's all these things going on, or like I'm not doing well, or this really great thing happened to me, like to just kind of open up that dialogue to like, you know, outside of that academic realm, I think would be really useful too, and kind of do that on a more regular basis. I think that would help just kind of touch base and prevent certain things from happening, especially if like faculty are aware that things are happening as well. I think that would be really useful and
Yeah.
fun too. Like I like talking about life with people. Like, is that so hard?
I've worked with a few directors from like the theater world, and something that they'll do sometimes is just like before every rehearsal, like at the start of every rehearsal, do like roundtable check-ins, and everyone just goes around and says, you know what, today I'm in a really bad mood, or I'm a little tired today, but I'm doing well. And it just, everyone knows where everyone else is at. And I think that's a beautiful thing. And like, if you are having a really rough day and you just say that to people, it gets it off your chest, like that kind of thing, I think. Um, very
And
similar
honestly,
to what you're
even then,
saying.
maybe too, like the director or whoever, like they're just gonna be a little bit nicer to you. Whereas, like on another day, you could take a little bit more criticism, but today you just can't. So they might just be aware of that, and it would just go better for everyone.
And it helps you to empathize too, because like on a date where, say, Joe over there is just not never coming in the right place. He just seems really distracted or whatever. If you don't know that he's just having a rough day or that his cat died last night, whatever, you're just going to get frustrated with Joe and be like, what's going on with you? Like, why can't you get it together? Whereas if you know that he's just going through some stuff, you're going to be more ready to say, okay, let's cut Joe some slack, you know?
I have another fun question to close, which is a couple questions actually. First of all, what do you do outside of music that brings you joy? And what do you do within music that reminds you of why you love to do it at those times when maybe your mental health is not at its peak?
So there's a lot of things I do. So some of the biggest ones that come to mind first is exercising and socializing. Nothing makes me feel better than just like going for a walk or like going to get a coffee with a friend or something like that. Like that just like in a way, like it kind of forces me to like keep my brain active and it feels good because then once I'm in that mindset, I'm like, okay, we're good now. I can keep going. And I also like to do just kind of like little art things for fun, like just painting boxes from the dollar store. Like I've been doing that for a few years now, and like I just find it really kind of like therapeutic. And then like by the end of it, you have just like this fun, cute little project that you can like give as a gift. Um, and so like other things within music. So I've recently decided to not do a master's degree, and that has actually been a really good decision for me, which was something I didn't predict, say 2 years ago. I thought I was gonna just go right through. But like I just decided the timing wasn't right for me and that I just kind of wanted to like do music differently for a while. So what I've been doing is like I've just been playing like kind of like my own like rock and metal music on piano and like really just kind of like having fun and doing some sight reading, learning guitar too, which is like it's actually really fun to be like bad at an instrument again. There's something really like freeing about like, yeah, I can play an E minor chord, I'm cool. And so then like yeah, just kind of like rediscovering myself a little bit. So it is kind of fun like to make sure that I do things outside of music, but then also remember to have fun within music too.
I like to write and I like to sew clothes and really anything that makes me feel like, wow, I produced something, which is perhaps going back to that toxic productivity and the need to have something to show for your time. But I like that they're both creative outlets, but I don't feel any pressure writing on them because they're not. I never claimed to be a writer. I never claimed to be, a seamstress. Um, and not necessarily for anyone else's benefit, but I definitely I find that that's a really good way to escape the pressure that I put on myself. I've been really enjoying making music with people. Like Brooklyn and I have had some jam sessions, and especially with the pandemic, I really, really cherish like the times when I can go in person and make music with somebody. Like I realized at the end of the school year that I had a moment where I went, oh, I'm not going to go in and meet with my pianist every single week. There goes that. Um, and I'm really, really happy that there are people around and that restrictions are eased up enough that we're able to get together and just have fun.
Um, when I'm not doing musical things, I like to run, I like to do yoga. I'm a little bit like you as well, Siwan, where I like doing things that are unproductive, productive. Um, like little arts. Like I like to paint, I like to cross stitch, I like stuff like that. I've been watching a lot of Great British Baking Show, and I've been baking a lot because of that. Because I'll see them make a pie, and I'll be like, I want a pie. I'm gonna make a pie. And so that's fun. Within music, kind of like you, Brooklyn, I kind of just like to do like just music I like that is not like in the field that I'm pursuing. Like I'll just sing a pop song that I've been enjoying lately or that is kind of expressing what I'm feeling. And I find I like to do that at the end of my practice sessions because it's a good way to like expel all of those feelings that, you know, like any frustrations or just anxieties or whatever, just kind of gets it out there. And it's a great way to like cool down your voice as well. So that's something that I like to do.
Yeah, and just a side note, I want to add on to that. That's funny that you say that you like do that as a cool down, because I would actually do like kind of my fun rock music as a warm up. So it'd be like, okay, I have to go practice and I really don't want to, so I'll just play the System of a Down before I start. And it's great because then I'm like, okay, we're ready to play some other stuff now.
Totally.
Like out of music, I do a lot of things. I find myself being the happiest when I'm doing things for my family or like for my friends. So like I would like bake for people. I would like make little pouches for people. I would like draw illustrations for someone. Like I find myself, you know, doing more stuff for other people. But like musically though, I don't know, like whenever I'm like sad or whatever, I'm like, oh, let's sing Senza Mama. Like maybe that will help with your vocality. Like whenever I'm depressed, oh, let's do some like Traviata. Like, you know, like let's try something and like try to work that into my technique. So yeah, it's not so much just for fun, but it's fun for me. I don't know. It's kind of drifting from the question a little bit. Classic kind of. I'm sorry.
I really like to read. I think I like the escapism of it, just like getting outside of my own reality for a bit and into someone else's shoes and their own problems takes me away from my own life. Yeah, so that's really fun. I also like doing like visual arts, and I've been getting back into drawing and painting, which has been fun and nice. And then I guess within music, kind of like all of you, I like to like jam out, just have like jam sessions, especially if I'm not feeling it. Like best way to make myself feel better is to like remind myself why I like this art form and why I'm here and why I'm doing this. So yeah, just obnoxiously belting pop songs when I can't belt is just a really good way to yeah, make me feel motivated again.
That's fantastic. Thank you again so much for agreeing to participate in the panel. And I think that this was a really fun discussion, and I loved hearing what you all had to say. And I hope that it was fun and informative for you all as well. So thank you. And end scene.